Good morning to our viewers in the United States, and good afternoon to our viewers in Europe. I'm Steve Sokol, the president of the American Council on Germany. Thank you for joining us for this virtual Transatlantic Town Hall with Peter Beyer. Peter is a member of the Bundestag and also serves as the coordinator for Transatlantic Cooperation in the German Federal Foreign Office. Today's event is being held as part of WunderbarTogether USA 2020, a comprehensive and collaborative initiative funded by the German Federal Foreign Office and administered by the Goethe-Institut. Peter Beyer hardly needs an introduction. He's served in the Bundestag since 2009 and has been the coordinator for Transatlantic Cooperation since April of 2018. He also serves on the Bundestag's Foreign Affairs Committee, where he is the special rapporteur on transatlantic relations. Peter has a deep connection to the United States, having studied law at the University of Virginia and having spent time working for law firms in Chicago and Los Angeles before entering politics. Peter, herzlich willkommen.
It's so good to be here. Good to see you, actually see you on video. Thanks for the invitation, Steve.
Well, thank you for joining us. As I said before we went live, I really wish we were able to see each other in person, but I think we both know it will be quite a few months before that's possible. And at least we have the technology of Zoom to be able to connect us this way. So thank you for making the time to be with us. Peter, you've been a keen observer of the United States and a close follower of developments in the transatlantic relationship. And you can certainly attest to the fact that there has been an ebb and a flow to the German-American relationship. Before we dive in and talk about the state of that relationship, I'd like to ask you to share some of your observations about what's going on in the United States and how that might affect the transatlantic partnership moving forward. Although more than 80 million Americans voted for Joe Biden, nearly 74 million votes were cast for President Donald Trump. This shows that support for Donald Trump and his policies remains strong with a large segment of the American population. What does that tell you about the United States, and how does this impact how Germans think about the US?
Thanks so much again for the invitation, Stephen. Thanks for this first question, which is not an easy one, but I would try to address the issues contained therein. Me being an outside observer from a foreign country, I will not give some kind of advice or anything like that. It's not up to me. But of course, we over here on the other side of the Atlantic are very, very, very interested in, how was the campaign, how were the elections going, and everything in the aftermath. Of course, we try to think and try to do our evaluations and analyses. What does it mean for us? What does, the domestic politics, the changes in the society in the United States of America, what's going on? We're trying to understand the United States of America. Many of us, including myself, thought back in 2016, we know the United States of America, we know the American citizens, so it's quite sure how the results would come out in 2016. Well, we didn't know it, including me. So I think there's so much yet to learn about the Americans. Is there a typical Americans? Probably no. It's about the coast, the cities, the metropolitan areas, about the rural areas, the composition, the demographic composition. It's changing. That is something that we have to understand as well. That there are fewer and fewer people, American citizens, who can claim roots in Germany or other European countries, but instead in Asia or in Latin America, for instance, or from elsewhere. So that is also something that's going, potentially be mirrored also on the Hill in Washington. So not everybody has in their genes, so to speak, transatlantic. When they wake up in the morning, they don't always think about transatlantic relations, but maybe trans-Pacific relations. But coming back to the results of the presidential, and I should add also the congressional elections, both on the Senate and the House side, I mean, I never expected something like a landslide victory for either one of the candidates, neither for Trump nor for Biden in the beginning. So I thought it would be very, very small in the margin. Well, now if you look to the electorals you got, that Joe Biden is a large, is far ahead of the incumbent president of Donald Trump. But of course, I mean, we were concerned about, the democracy, the oldest active democracy in the world. I personally still have really trust, and I was always saying this in all the interviews that I gave, that I have a lot of trust in the institutions, in the separation of powers. Be it on a local level, be it on the state level, or all the way up to the US Supreme Court. And I have even more trust in the people, in the Americans, and the citizens. If you look back over the centuries, so many crises they fought and won and overcome. They will also make the best out of the current situation. And so, yes, we hope for a better transatlantic relation. Quite frankly, I can say now I'm quite happy that there will be a change in the Oval Office, because of the past 4 years were not the best ones across the big pond.
So, Peter, you rightly said that you're an outside observer, watching what's going on in the U.S., but you're also a keen observer. And I know in pre-COVID times, you would come to the US quite frequently, and you made a point of getting away from the coasts into the heartland. You made a point of really trying to unpack some of that urban-rural divide that was demonstrated by the 2016 election results. And you made an effort to try to understand some of the demographic shifts. So in light of the experiences that you've had in the US and the observations that you've made in the US, do you look at a country that's deeply divided, or are you just still trying to understand some of the different trends that are going on here in the US?
I think both is true. If you ask me, I think it's a country that's divided. Also, not only, but also reflected in the votings. You mentioned like around 80 million for Joe Biden and around 74 million for Donald Trump. That is something that cannot cannot say, well, it's just a result of a presidential election like any election before. No, it's a huge dimension, and it shows a deep division of the country as far as I see it. It has to do also with ideology, the convictions, with rich and poor, urban and rural, and those who still think they are detached from the technological benefits, and many other things. Again, and that is one thing. So yes, I think it's a country that's divided. And that also means, again, for me as an outsider, but somebody who has really intensively over the past decades, I should say, traveled the country, almost all the states, it's now even more interesting than ever before right now to travel the country, to meet Americans, not only in New York, sorry to say that, Steve, but elsewhere throughout the nation. It's much more interesting than ever before, because there's a lack of understanding, at least if I speak for myself. Yes, I can say there's a division, but what are the facets of that? Of course, I can say, well, there's police violence, there's Black Lives Matter, there's something with climate, and so on and so on. But what does it really mean? Only if you can meet these people, if you travel to the cities, to the areas where this is happening, and not only where you expect somebody who is, of the same political mindset, who even knows who you are, maybe, or where Berlin is and what the Berliners or those folks in Brussels are doing, maybe people that don't care about us. But I want to understand the Americans, because I'm deeply convinced also the American people and America as a nation will remain a superpower, both with regard to the mere size of the country, with regard to population, but especially also with regard to economical and military power. That will not change. Yes, there is already ongoing a diminishing global role. We will see where that is going, and we'll talk about this maybe in the next 45 minutes or so. But I mean, you guys will remain to be important, and that is also a lesson that I think we should learn. It is even more important, not only more interesting, but even more important to understand America, and I say explicitly not only Washington, D.C., because this is not America, much better than before. Otherwise, we will not find the right answers to deal with each other.
I think you're absolutely right. It's a big country, and obviously there's a lot going on here, and it's important for you to have your finger on the pulse on those different parts of America. As a shameless plug for the ACG, it's sort of one of the reasons why, although we're based in New York, we have a network of chapters in 22 cities across the country to really try to engage the entire country or communities throughout the country in this conversation about the transatlantic relationship. And so that provides a good sort of jumping off point for the other topic that I wanted to focus on with you. In my conversations with many Germans, there seems to be a sense of relief that Joe Biden was elected. And many Germans hope for a Neustart, or a new beginning for the transatlantic relationship. Peter, do you think the relationship between Germany and the US will change significantly under the Biden administration? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. As I indicated earlier, I was in the choir of those singing, when the results were out there, because again, I mean, the last 4 years were really bad. Emotions in politics sometimes are important, and that was a moment in time where I think it was good to show emotions. There would certainly be a change in the transatlantic relations, but not in the regard that we should think about now everything before was really bad, and now from January 21st onwards, everything will be nice and good and all problems will go away. No. As you certainly know, I keep repeating to say we don't have the luxury to waste any more time on transatlantic nostalgia. So, dreaming of good old times in transatlantic, it's a time, hey, wake up. That's not going to happen. And especially as a German citizen and a German politician at that, I should also add, we shouldn't hide behind our own history for yet another so and so many years. It's time not only to wake up, but really to press this restart button in the transatlantic relations. There are a lot of terms out there currently. You mentioned the Neustart, the reset button, or the reassurance, or sometimes I speak of let's build up the new West, whatever that means. We can talk about that as well. But what unites us is really still, I mean, it sounds like really old-fashioned, but it's really at the core of our relationship. It's still the shared values, solid foundation. That's so important. We acknowledge that. We know that. We have to reassure ourselves about that, but we should not stop there. The task that we have now, and now I'm speaking of this side of the Atlantic where I am sitting, is use the time, sit down, not wait until Joe Biden has completely composed his cabinet and the whole administration, and then wait for the American friends to present something to us. For example, unilaterally do away with anti-dumping duties or tariffs or whatever, sanctions and so on. No, that's not going to work. So the reset button to press that, to make this Neustart, is nothing that would come automatically. It requires two to tango, and we need to do the first step. It's a little bit complicated now with regard to this thing. I think it's called the Logan Act, right? So it's difficult to really reach out to establish contacts now in this period of time with the Biden team, transition team, and so on. unless they are not, incumbent, unless they are not really in office. It's only happening after the 20th of January. In 2016, there was this Russian collusion thing, as you all know. So it's really difficult. Apart from this telephone call between President-elect Joe Biden and Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, there has not yet. Shouldn't say there's been nothing, but those who play a role in becoming a minister or secretary of some kind of thing in America, it's not so easy really to directly discuss things with them. So if we think about reconsidering, reinsuring, or renewing the transatlantic relations, we here should use the time, and we're currently intensively doing so. See, what do we expect? What do we expect ourselves from us in Germany and in Europe from our involvement in transatlantic relations? We should completely turn a blind eye on the possible expectations from Washington, but first concentrate on what do we think that there should be, and then write that down as a response to our own expectations, and also as an offer to our transatlantic friends. I know that currently the Commission in Brussels, so the European Union, is intensely working on writing down something as an offer. That the German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas had put down some 5 points and so as a start. The CDU-CSU group in the parliament in the German Bundestag recently sat down, and I'm leading this process as the main rapporteur for transatlantic relations in the Foreign Relations Committee. And we wrote down, I think, 12 pages, narrow lines, where we try to meet these expectations and find answers and make offers to our transatlantic friends. We will plan. The plan is to pass that in mid of January, when when the Parliament comes back together at the beginning of the year, so around inauguration, and that is something without looking to our current coalition partner. It's just the CDU-CSU. A lot of good stuff in it. It's not just a mere update of position papers of the past, because we cannot use these phrases of the past. They won't work for all the challenges that are there on the table, and we might want to talk about that later, about what concretely do we envisage.
So I'd like to push you on that a little bit. Obviously, the tone and tenor of the relationship are likely to change, and I think many would welcome that. It's clear that Europe and the United States face some common challenges, but the partnership is not without its somewhat controversial sticking points. And so I'd like to draw you out a little bit from the thinking that you and your colleagues have been doing already. Where are the areas for collaboration, but where are the sticking points where there might be continued tensions that need to be worked on? I think that these are two different buckets, if you will, that deserve a little bit of attention.
But even though, yeah, absolutely right. But even those, even the topics and the fields of where we are not completely aligned and not completely on the same side, are also not where I would say it's either black or white. It's something up for discussion, and that's democracy, and that's where we need to discuss or even formally negotiate. And so let me come back to your question. So what I would say would remain, nice things remain. Irony is here. Some of the topics that will certainly remain a topic of friction, controversial discussions are very obvious, and I hate to mention it all the time, but since you asked, and I mustn't shy away from reality, is obviously Nord Stream 2, so energy security, politics. The friends and colleagues on the Hill think they take good care about our European energy security interests. We can do this ourselves, but it's about, in the end, it's about Russia and the Kremlin, and we're talking about Nord Stream 2. About those who are not so familiar with that, it's we're talking about a second string of a already almost a completely existing pipeline lying on the ground of the Baltic Sea, bringing gas from Russia to Germany to be distributed all over Europe. So, you know, I don't know. Some experts say we need it. Others say we don't need it so badly because, you know, the pipeline system that we have in Europe is you know, there's a lot of potential as regards volume. So I don't know about that. It's very heavily loaded with political influence and stuff. So that will remain on the table, especially between Senate, and I should also add the House and the Europeans. It's not going to be easy to deal with that because sanctions are attached, and whenever there are sanctions between real closest allies, friends, that's something that's not so nice. So that's why it's one of the top negatively connotated topics in the transatlantic dialogue of the past 3, 4, 5 years. You know, and then there is, you know, there's a big fields where I think we should come together, at least meet somewhere halfway. It's trade and defense. So first I should start with trade. I mean, I was the one just like 10 minutes ago who said, you know, do not look back, no nostalgia. But I just briefly want to mention TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, a free trade area between Europe and the United States of America. Never became a reality. It's a pity. But anyway, there we are. On the contrary, over the past 4 years, we were confronted by the Trump administration with, with additional tariffs on steel, aluminum, the threat of additional car tariffs. Just like a month ago or so, Wilbur Ross, the Secretary of Commerce, announced punitive or anti-dumping duties up to 352.7% on a German aluminum company. So that is, you know, whose competitor, the competitor of this, the German company happens to reside, to be headquartered in Pennsylvania. So it was politically attached, right? So that is some. So we have sanctions, we have protectionism in trade on the table. That's why I mentioned in the beginning, no nostalgia, and I should also add no retro spectacles, that everything will go away now, like miraculously or miraculously, or like automatically. We need to make offers. So I expect from a Joe Biden administration that he, together with his folks, will heavily concentrate domestically, so inwards bound, with regard to healing the wounds of its own country, of the society, and making stimulus packages there and so on. So he will not be probably, it will not be on one of the top priorities of the Joe Biden administration to negotiate with the Europeans to do away with all these protective measures that Trump has implemented. But we should not, as I mentioned earlier, and I repeat it here, wait until Joe Biden and his folks turn to us and say, hey, there's something, do you want to talk about this? No, that's why I mentioned also Brussels is writing down something as we speak to make offers, because again, with the phrases of the past, we will come nowhere. So, German Economic Minister Peter Altmaier recently said publicly in Germany, said, yeah, the European proposal for an industry duties agreement is on the table. I don't think that will work. Even though I think we will not have the opportunity really to have a comprehensive and ambitious negotiating agenda, a free trade agenda across the Atlantic in the near future. That should not lead to the false response not to be ambitious, not to engage, to make ambitious steps towards the American friends. So I recently, last week, I talked with the the Director General of the European Commission, happens to be a German lady, Sabine Weyand, DG Trade Commissioner. And we talked exactly about these things. So what can we expect? What should we do? What should we offer from the European side when it comes to a transatlantic agenda? She was realistic, but at the same time, cautiously optimistic. Concretely, she said what we should and could easily achieve is doing away with bureaucracy in international supply chains, especially as regards combating the consequences of the pandemic, the corona pandemic, and also with regard to distribution of vaccines. That is something that we should, do away with bureaucracy. And second thing she said, we should, and she was quite optimistic about that, much better coordinate subsidies. I think she had Boeing and Airbus cases, WTO cases in mind. Doesn't make sense, what happens there. So that was trade with regard to defense.
Just maybe very briefly before you jump to defense, one of the things that we've been hearing from a number of our speakers is they don't think that there's much likelihood that TTIP will be revived and that there will be new opportunities to negotiate trade and investment, but they keep coming back to reform of the WTO, and this is an area where Europe and the US can work together. It sounds as if that's something that you're thinking as well.
Yeah, absolutely. WTO reform is overdue. We've been working on this for quite some while, got stuck, but it is about reforming the appellate body. That is something, but it's not only about the judges for the appellate body, where it's a US side now to nominate the judges, it's blocked there. It's even more, where we could easily agree is on the next, Director General thing, so personnel something. But with regard to the system, the structure of WTO, we have to really think about how can we force find mechanisms that the members of WTO, and I'm thinking of China, really play by the rules, that they offer full reciprocity, market access, and not only abuse the system where they are part of, not only take the benefits of the good stuff out of the system. That is something that we need to work on. WTO reform is really important. If we believe, and I think we in Europe, and Joe Biden has made several statements in that regard, believe that he also believes in the international rules-based order, multilateralism, strengthening the international organizations where WTO is part of that system. Then we have a good basis to really address that together as Europeans with the American friends. That is something that should be an easy one to start with and really to make progress. Paris Climate Accord, the WHO, the World Health Organization, if something needs to be reformed, that is for sure. But these are the things, JCPOA, the Iranian nuclear deal, these are fields where we see good restarts, I should say, with the Americans to start working together again and not do any unilateral stuff, which really was very, very unsuccessful in the end. Also, all these maximum pressure politics didn't show any result, any success. So that is something that we really could work on. That's I agree.
So I sidetracked you. You wanted to talk about defense as well, and I think it's clear to all of us that the Biden administration will have a recommitment to NATO, and there too we'll see a change in tone and tenor. But the 2% issue is one that will remain. So how does that tie in with your assessment of defense as an issue where the US and Europe can be working together?
Yeah, defense, I mean, we have worked together over many decades in the past. And we need to restructure our cooperation for the future within NATO. Many things to that regard. As you know, several months ago, through a Wall Street Journal article, President Trump announced a unilateral reduction of US troops in Germany. So it was more or less clear it was a punishment of Germany because we are not paying enough. Well, he's right there, but anyway. But no, there has not been a single order to withdraw a single US soldier from German soil until that has, after that. I mean, in the very briefly before Donald Trump fired Defense Minister Mark Esper, there were some rumors here that Mark Esper would come to Germany and lead discussions, negotiate to implement reduction. It was only rumor, has never been confirmed, and it never happened because he lost his job, right? So, and I talked to the U.S. liaison officers in Bavaria just recently. They haven't received a single order to implement anything like that. I think, as far as I know, Joe Biden has said, he will examine his predecessor's decision, but I think we can be very sure that it will not be a unilateral punishment action by the American friends. No, I mean, underway is already intensely debate, and we should see in the future a lot of action and dynamics in that regard. That the EU member states are really not only talking about 2%, and I would say a little bit about this in a second, but that they use this time as a lessons learned, that it is a necessity to address that the EU, that the NATO member countries define how does the NATO of the future and the not too far future, and maybe even tomorrow, look like? Where are our interests? Do our security interests also lie in South China Sea, in the Indo-Pacific? As you might know, the German government has drafted some Indo-Pacific guidelines, which are have been very well received, not only in the Parliament, also in our foreign partners. South China Sea is something we could do together. I think we need to do something together. Canadian friends want to talk with us about, that we cooperate much closer together in that region of the globe. So NATO needs to reinvent itself, adapt and adjust to the changed global security architecture of today and of the foreseeable future. That is something where I expect Joe Biden be very active in that discussion, or the administration, and that is very much welcome. So there will be no unilateral punishment of any single country. Now 2%. Yes, I mean we have 2014, the Defense Investment Pledge. We signed that. We didn't do enough. We know that, and by 2024, within that 10 years period of time, we will not reach the 2% of GDP defense spending. We're trying to get there. We have started slowly, sluggishly, but now, I mean, compared to 2014, we have increased our defense budget by a little bit over 45%, which is not nothing, but it's not yet enough. But as you can take from what I'm saying, is money is something, and we need to do that. It's about readiness. It's about capabilities. But only talking about money, for me, it's too simple. It's much, you need to be smarter. Again, NATO restructuring, adjusting to today's realities. And then I might also add an aspect that has only recently become much more public in the debate. That is all the talk about Europe's strategic autonomy or Europe's strategic sovereignty. So what does that mean? Is it only a fight, a debate about terms or not? I think there's more to it. If you think about an autonomy, both in defense and, for example, in the digital world, that sounds like a Europe, a fortress Europe. Well, to be autonomous, we don't need the others. That would be so wrong, so wrong. So I prefer much more the term and the concept that's behind it. for European sovereignty in these two fields that I just mentioned, defense and digital world. Defense, as you know, we have, we always use the phrase, we try to strengthen the European pillar of NATO. That is something that our NATO allies, foremost the American friends, expected from us. So we are trying to do a little bit more there with regards to a permanent structured cooperation called PESCO. And there's also a lot of fuss about the EDF, the European Defense Fund, which aims at building up a European defense industry. Raises eyebrows in Washington and the Pentagon and elsewhere, because the Europeans try to write down and set a framework of criteria and set of rules and regulations that the Americans are afraid that they will be left out. That is not the aim. They should not be afraid. The second field, digitization, you might have heard about the so-called Gaia X project initiated by France and Germany to create a European cloud infrastructure. I mean, all these Microsoft and Apples and Googles of this world, and namely all these companies are talking to me on a weekly basis, because also they are concerned that they are left out in this. No, it's legitimate, I think, and it's necessary that the Europeans, build up own capabilities, but it's not aimed at to leave anybody out, especially not the American friends. If they comply with this new set of rules once it's done, and they can make their offers under this umbrella as well. So, but these are the talks of the Transatlantic Town.
Yeah, I mean, these are obviously the issues that are on the agenda and where we need to be in direct dialogue with each other and exchanging ideas. One of the topics that you just touched on, but which I'd like to unpack a little bit further, is China. I had a question for you on China, but one of our viewers asks a very similar question. So let me read you her question.
Okay.
To what extent do you see US-European coordination on a strategy toward China as being a key part of transatlantic dialogue moving forward? China is actively courting deals with Europe at the moment. And so will Europe become materially more hawkish on China going forward, or will it be in an uneasy equilibrium between the United States and China?
Well. If you ask Peter Beyer, it would be, my preferences are clear. No, but that is that question. All that's behind that goes to the core, to what is the challenge of our times, where there's no simple, clear answer to that. But some remarks to that. I mean, over the past 4 years, we were confronted with the demand, I should say, by the US, by the Trump administration, to completely decouple from China, which is an impossibility. I mean, nobody could expect Europe to completely decouple from China. There's a huge economic interest, obviously. The German car manufacturers, Siemens and others, only, I should almost say, survive these days because of the Chinese market, although they're also not treated completely undiscriminatory. They're not completely fairly, but they make business there and save German jobs. We should, I mean, that's, I don't know if I mentioned it here before, these friction between, no, I think I didn't. There was some friction recently publicly between the German defense minister, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, AKK, and French President Emmanuel Macron, about European sovereignty, autonomy, yes or no? Do we need the Americans, yes or no? And from the French side, I mean, I understand completely it's domestically driven with the French president, but it sounded more like, well, the Europeans can do their stuff themselves. No, Easy answer, no. And I think Macron himself knows that. And AKK, the German defense minister, which happens also to be my party chairwoman, for yet like another 1.5 months. She said, no, I mean, we need to do both. And I think she's absolutely right. We need to intensify our partnership with the Americans and at the same time build up European capabilities. So I think from a Joe Biden administration, we could expect a much better understanding how the European Union works, the mechanisms. So I don't expect this demand of a completely decoupling from China. So one thing we have seen over the past 2 years or so, really a trade war between the Americans and China, which ended temporarily, I might say, in the so-called Phase 1 deal. So they found some kind of agreement, but the Europeans are somehow squeezed in between the Far East and the American friends. If we want to be strong, if we want to secure the way we're living, and also the relative prosperity that we enjoy, peace and stability in Europe, we cannot but partner and do much more things together with the American friends. And yes, also, I would very much welcome if we could coordinate our China policies much better than in the past, align that where we identify that is realistically possible, and where it makes sense. Where we are completely worlds apart, okay, I understand that it's not possible. But now we talk about 5G, the new standard in mobile technology. Germany has postponed to make a political decision on do we want Chinese technology, yes or no, for 1.5 years now. Should have been passed in May last year. Now we have almost December of this year, 2020. And I belong to a group of parliamentarians, and I think a growing group of parliamentarians in the German Bundestag who take a very critical view on Chinese technology, because we think we have a responsibility to protect the interests of our people for many reasons. I don't want to go too much into the technical and political details there. But so I think we should be here in that 5G decision on the US side, partner with them and build up capabilities here to meet the needs of our people in that regard. South China Sea, I said already a little bit. Look, also making agreements between the European Union and the Chinese and China. We're still struggling about finding coming to terms with the Chinese in an investment agreement. Has been negotiating for quite some while already. Should have been signed by the end of this year, but it's still so much work in progress. I don't see that to happen any time soon. One last thing, Steve, if I may, that is important. It's because economy is really at the core of our transatlantic relations. Data protection. You all know that due to two decisions by the European Court of Justice, initiated by an Austrian guy, there were two judgments by the European Court of Justice saying that the privacy shield, which was an agreement between the Americans and the Europeans, when it comes to exchange of data across the Atlantic, that it is not, legal. So it has been done away with. It's not existing anymore. So there's a lot of insecurity and uncertainty across the Atlantic about all the UPSs, but also small and medium-sized company, that when you send an email with attachment, for example, or exchange any kind of data across the Atlantic, it's a lot of uncertainty. Is that safe? Is that legal? Which regime of laws is applying to that? I know for sure that both the European Commission and Washington are intensely working on finding as an agreement, a successor to the Privacy Shield, to build up again data protection security across the Atlantic. And I personally think we should also look beyond to a transatlantic data regime. So an really a broadly comprising transatlantic data protection regime, even beyond the successor to the Privacy Shield. We need a lot. We need certainty here very soon, because all the companies that are doing business across the Atlantic currently are somewhere in between, only acting on this set of terms and conditions, boilerplate stuff that they're using anyway. But the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, indicated that that might also not be feasible. So also a big topic.
So yes, a very big topic, and one where I think there's also an opportunity for greater transatlantic cooperation to set some of those standards and norms moving forward. Peter, earlier in our conversation, you did talk a little bit about European sovereignty and about German responsibility. And I'd like to bring up an article that you published late last month in Internationale Politik Quarterly and fold in a viewer question. In the article, you argued that Germany has to build capacity in foreign and security policy, and you outlined a couple of critical steps toward a new German foreign policy. In the piece, you touched on relations with China, relations with Russia, which we've talked a little bit about today, but you also talked about the creation of a National Security Council type organization in Germany. Of course, next year is an election year in Germany. And I guess the question that I have, and that some of our viewers have, is how much focus, how much attention will be on foreign policy and national security issues in an election year? And one viewer specifically wants to know to what degree the transatlantic relationship might play a role in the Bundestag election and the selection of a chancellor.
Yeah, but you know, this question is not too early asked. It's right at exactly the right time. I mean that I know the Secretary Generals are part of our sister parties, both CDU and CSU. You are heavily working already on the campaign for next year, and. I have somewhere here, I have a draft of actually it's right here, but it's not public yet. Should be passed by mid of January next year. So around the inauguration in the United States, it's a draft paper by the CDU-CSU parliamentary group. It's only about transatlantic relations. What do you think? And it's really it's good stuff. It's not just an update; it's completely rewritten. But you referred, Steve, to this my little piece in IP Quarterly, and I published it elsewhere as well. You know, that is not a new idea. I think. Well, let me first answer the question or address the question: do foreign politics play a role, to what extent, in transatlantic relations, and then in the general elections next year? Yes, increasingly, both foreign politics and transatlantic relations. Look, I mean, the Germans have a very bad image about the United States currently. That has been. I mean, I have to say that we know that it has heavily been negatively influenced by by President Trump and how he treated the allies, Germany and other European countries. And so Germans, and I'm not talking for myself, Germans didn't like Donald Trump, period. And all the surveys say, you know, like 70-80% of the Germans view the America not as really a good friend, whereas the Americans say, well, the Germans are good friends, 70% or so of the Americans. So you're the nice guys. But so I want to change that image, because it's distorted. It's not only about the current guy in the Oval Office. It's America is so much more, and American transatlantic relations is so much more than only tweets on Twitter out of the Oval Office or the White House. So what I can say is, yes, Germans are extremely interested in an improvement of transatlantic relations. I think they will be very curiously observing how Joe Biden is doing. And the German general elections, the Bundestag elections, will be on September 26th next year. So it's a little bit less than a year. And international relations, foreign politics, have over the past 3-4 Bundestag elections, general elections, played an increasing role. Sometimes also with a negative view, Afghanistan and stuff. But now Germans feel increasingly that we have a responsibility in Europe and in the world, and that we can deliver to some extent, that we have grown up. That is something that the Germany as a society needs to learn. It takes some time, and we need to push them a little bit to understand that, but that's our responsibility. So clear answer, yes, foreign politics and transatlantic relations will play a not so unimportant role next year in the campaign, trust me. Second thing was, help me out there, Steve, that was some kind of authority body, call it the National Security Security Council or something like that. Of course, anything exactly like what you guys in America have, a National Security Council, does not fit our structure here in Germany for many reasons. But what is at the core of my idea, and it's not a new idea, but I refreshed that, and I'm have a structure. I'm not just demanding that. I've a lot of details how we could really make that thing become a reality. At the core of my idea is the lesson learned that we need to coordinate German foreign politics, defense politics, das heißt Entwicklungszusammenarbeit,
development aid,
and also, and also if you look like international supply chains, combating on a global scale a pandemic, the current one and future pandemic, that is something that we need to coordinate much better. The way the legal regime under which the German federal government is working goes back to the Konrad Adenauer days, so many decades ago. Has been adjusted only like 3-4 times, not substantially. And what makes things even worse is that not only does the foreign ministry, the chancellery, the Ministry for Economic Affairs, and so on, and the Ministry for Development Aid have ministers, secretaries with different party memberships in a coalition. And that makes things not easier. But so there's a lot of competition between these ministries. We need to have urgently some kind of council that has competence, that has the funds, that has the personnel, and really is not something like an alibi, and is not dealing only with defense export of German defense material, but really coordinates all these fields of German politics. Only then can we really implement these things that I mentioned at the very beginning, the expectancies that we have to us in foreign international politics, that our allies on the other side of the big pond might have towards us, and otherwise, and present the responses. We can happily, put down things on paper and pass position papers. That's nice, but I think we need to come out of this academic talk. We need to start with real clear politics, if I may use that phrase, and we need to have that organizational structure in the German government. Otherwise, it will not work.
Peter, thank you. You have touched on a lot of issues in a relatively short period of time. And as a closing question, I'd like to ask you the following hypothetical, which I've asked in previous virtual town halls. If you had the opportunity to sit down with President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris for 10 or 15 minutes, what would be the 2 or 3 issues you would raise with them as being important for US foreign policy and for the German-American relationship?
Well, very efficient, non-competitive cooperation to combat the current pandemic. Second would be global fight against the change of climate, consequence of climate change. It should be a no-brainer. Need to do more. And it's not only about re-entering the Paris Climate Accord. It's more than that, right? We all know that that thing is a lot symbolic, only attached to that. We need to really align our politics there. Third thing would be, hey, let's sit down for the benefit of our two nations and countries, do away with this stupid tariffs. And, not unilaterally, we need to do also something, but really constructively work on that, get this done. And the fourth thing would be really reshaping NATO to make it fit. It's needed. We need it for the future, not the way we did it in the past. Modernize, improve NATO.
Well, Peter, that's an ambitious agenda, but I think you've hit on the key issues. Obviously, the response to the pandemic and dealing with COVID is the most immediate priority that we have. Climate change is one that will definitely be high on the agenda of this administration. And then, of course, turning to trade and NATO reform, those will be issues that will be discussed in the transatlantic context. For now, I just want to thank you, Peter Beyer, for participating in today's virtual Transatlantic Town Hall as part of WunderbarTogether USA 2020. It's been a fabulous discussion, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the year to come, when we will also be talking a lot more about German politics.
Yeah. Looking forward to that, Steve. And I enjoyed it so much. I see like 80 people were in the audience. That's a good crowd. And greetings to everybody. Stay healthy. Have a great Christmas time and a good turn of the year. If we don't see each other before that, keep up the good work. American Council on Germany is a nationwide organization. It's one of the cornerstones of transatlantic relations. We love you. We need you, especially in the future. Thanks so much for your good work.
Well, thank you, Peter. And we look forward to collaborating with you more as we continue on this. I also want to echo your thanks to our viewers. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. With that, a schöne Adventszeit to Berlin, and we look forward to being in touch.
Thanks so much, Steve. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.